This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. Good morning, I'm John Trout. It's Wednesday, March 13th, 2024. Here's what's coming up on America in the Morning.
The man behind the DOJ's investigation into alleged mishandling of classified documents stands by his report.
What I wrote is what I believe the evidence shows.
I'm Jim Roope.
The U.S. will rush more weapons to Ukraine from Pentagon stockpiles.
Ukraine does not have enough ammunition to fire back.
Sagar Meghani, Washington.
November's expected matchup in the presidential race, all but official.
Because I did more for black people.
I'm Clayton Neville.
Colorado Republican Ken Buck says he'll resign next week.
Choose the best candidates we can.
Norman Hall, Washington.
On Wall Street, stocks resumed their rally, and the S&P 500 index opens this morning at a new all-time high. I'm Jessica Ettinger.
Donald Trump says he's got 3 things he'll do immediately if he's reelected as president. I'm Pamela Furr.
All ahead on America in the Morning. Special Counsel Robert Hur is grilled on Capitol Hill by both sides of the political aisle over his report on the handling of classified documents by then-President Joe Biden. Jim Roope has the story.
In his Department of Justice report, Hur declined to charge Mr. Biden for willful detention of classified documents, bringing the ire of the GOP expressed by Representative Jim Jordan.
Joe Biden not only kept information he wasn't allowed to keep, and he not only failed to secure that information properly, he also shared it with people who weren't allowed to see it.
Democrats like Congressman Eric Swalwell were upset at the comment that the president, when Hur interviewed him, was an elderly old man with a poor memory.
You said to President Biden, you have a photographic understanding and recall of the House. Never appeared in your report, though. Is that correct? The word photographic?
That does not appear in my report.
The transcript of Hur's report was released hours before the hearing began. One controversial portion centers around the date of when Mr. Biden's son Beau died. After the initial release of the report, the president was indignant, slamming Hur for claiming he didn't remember the year, adding, quote, "How the hell dare he raise that," end quote. The transcript, however, shows it was Mr. Biden who actually raised the issue when trying to tie together events related to the document case. He did recall the month and day Beau died. Mr. Hur said while his investigation did show evidence that Mr. Biden willfully detained classified documents after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen, he could not show intent to do so without a reasonable doubt.
Because the evidence fell short of that standard, I declined to recommend criminal charges against Mr. Biden.
To make that determination, however, he said he had to consider the president's state of mind.
I had to consider the president's memory and overall mental state and how a jury likely would perceive his memory and mental state in a criminal trial.
Hur said he did not disparage the president and stands by his decision not to bring criminal charges.
Most importantly, what I wrote is what I believe the evidence shows and what I expect jurors would perceive and believe.
He also reminded Democrats that he did not exonerate Mr. Biden either. That word, he said, does not appear in the report. I'm Jim Roope.
More states held primary elections on what's being called Super Tuesday 2. Correspondent Clayton Neville reports both the results cemented November's expected showdown between former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden.
President Biden became the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee when he won enough delegates in Georgia to push him over the necessary mark. The president had been in Georgia in recent days campaigning and going after his political rival.
Our freedoms are literally on the ballot this November. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans are trying to take our freedoms away. And by the way, not all Republicans. This ain't your father's Republican Party. These guys are different. But guess what? We're not going to let them take them away.
Trump, who has also had no problem securing necessary delegates, focused heavily on Georgia ahead of the state's primary.
It should be 100% of the black people should vote for Trump because I did more for black people than any president other than Abraham Lincoln. It's true.
Primaries were held in Georgia and in Mississippi, where Trump fared extremely well in both states. Voters also cast primary ballots in Washington state and in Hawaii. And in Washington state, voters were urged by some pro-Palestinian groups to vote uncommitted in the Democratic presidential primary, essentially sending a message to President Biden that without a ceasefire in Gaza, he'll lose their support in November. Now an expected Trump-Biden matchup becoming reality. I'm Clayton Neville.
More aid for Ukraine, and GOP House Republican resigns. Those stories when America in the Morning continues after these messages. Late winter snowfall for the Rockies. Here's AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rinde on America in the Morning.
A storm moving through the Rockies and into the plains today will have enough cold air for snow in the mountains that it'll become increasingly colder for snow to lower to the valley floors tonight, as well as expanding into the western plains from northwest Kansas into Nebraska. Snow in the mountains will range from 6 to 12 inches, with a few places like Laramie, Wyoming, and Colorado Springs, Colorado, having a few inches by tomorrow morning. Additional snow will fall through the day Thursday into Thursday night, with several more inches expected. Outside of the storm centered in the Rockies, the west will have a few lingering rain or snow showers through parts of Nevada into Utah, as well as northern Arizona and northern New Mexico. The West Coast states will be largely dry finally, with some amount of sunshine and afternoon highs near or slightly below their historical average. The aforementioned Rockies storm will also produce some strong to severe thunderstorms late in the day in parts of eastern Kansas into southeast Nebraska. That will expand into northern Missouri and southern Iowa, and these storms will continue to expand at night into western Illinois. Thunderstorms can contain gusty winds, hail, flash flooding, and even a tornado, the risk for which will be most concerning at night. Outside of the severe thunderstorms, there will still be some rain developing from this system through the rest of Nebraska into South Dakota, and then expanding eastward into southern Minnesota, southern Wisconsin, and northern Illinois tonight. Before the rain gets underway, it's going to be a very warm day for mid-March across the plains, and this warmth will be expansive. They'll stretch through the Great Lakes, as well as parts of the southeast into New England. Some of the northern communities will be more than 25 degrees above their historical average. It'll be a largely dry day for most places as well, with just a few scattered thunderstorms across the Gulf Coast from Texas into Louisiana. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rinde.
I'm John Trout. Remember to follow us wherever you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. President Biden has announced a new urgent military aid shipment to Ukraine, even though it's run out of money to replace the weapons in its own stockpiles. Washington correspondent Sagar Magani reports.
The United States is announcing an emergency package for Ukraine, using cost savings from previously approved Pentagon contracts.
The U.S. will rush more weapons to Ukraine from Pentagon stockpiles, even though it lacks the money to replace them.
The package includes munitions and rounds to help Ukraine hold the line against Russia's brutal attacks for the next couple of weeks, which I have the authority to do without asking Congress for some more money right now.
It's the military's first announced security package since December, when the U.S. acknowledged it wasn't just out of money to replace the weapons, it's about $10 billion overdrawn. The latest aid comes with Ukraine running dangerously low on munitions.
When Russian troops advance and its guns fire, Ukraine does not have enough ammunition to fire back. That's costing terrain, it's costing lives, and it's costing us, the United States and the NATO alliance, strategically.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, hours before President Biden issued a similar warning.
This ammunition will keep Ukraine's guns firing for a period, but only a short period. It is nowhere near enough to meet Ukraine's battlefield needs, and it will not prevent Ukraine from running out of ammunition in the weeks to come.
The new weapons delivery won't help for long.
It's not nearly enough.
The Pentagon was able to fund this shipment after finding cost savings in some weapons contracts. The Biden administration is again urging Congress to provide billions more in funding for Ukraine, which is stalled in the GOP-led House.
Because as Paul remembers, Russia won't stop at Ukraine. Putin will keep going, putting Europe, the United States, and the entire free world at risk, in my view.
Sagar Magani, Washington.
The House GOP's slim majority is now razor thin. Correspondent Norman Hall reports on the surprise resignation of Colorado House Republican Ken Buck.
Colorado Republican Ken Buck says he'll resign next week.
This place just keeps going downhill, and I don't need to spend my time here. We've taken impeachment and we've made it a social media issue as opposed to a constitutional concept.
Buck is a staunch conservative who had already declined to run for re-election and has been increasingly critical of his party's handling of former President Donald Trump.
Mike Johnson's ability to talk me into staying here is going to be about as successful as his ability into talking me into unconstitutional impeachments.
During an appearance on CNN, Buck said this was the worst of his 9 years in Congress. Still, he told reporters at the Capitol he'll remain politically active.
I want to get involved in this election cycle and make sure we choose the best candidates we can.
Buck's departure will trigger a special election to serve the remainder of his term. Norman Hall, Washington.
Inflation higher, gas prices up. A deeper dive in our Wednesday business report when America in the Morning continues after these messages. You're with America in the Morning. This may come as a surprise to many, but America has led the world in oil production for the past 6 years and averaged 12.9 million barrels per day in 2023, a level which surpassed the global record of 12.3 million that the U.S. set in 2019. Oil producers pumped 13.3 million barrels of oil out of the ground in December of last year, now the all-time record high for 1 month. Despite it all, AAA says the average price for a gallon of regular gasoline is now $3.39. That's up 20 cents from a month ago, but well below the all-time high of $5 in 2022. Here's CNBC's Jessica Ettinger with more in Wednesday Business.
Wall Street opens this morning after a rally for the major averages yesterday. The S&P 500 index opens this morning at a fresh record high. Inflation did tick higher in February, but came in as expected. And investors like that. No surprises in the CPI, Consumer Price Index.
It didn't change the overall story, which is the components of CPI that are moving in the right direction lower seem to translate better into the Fed's preferred PCE inflation measure. And anybody who thought that inflation was going to be sticky around these levels probably found something to work with in this number.
CNBC's Mike Santoli. Overall, a rise of 0.4% from the month before. And where were prices higher? Shelter and gas made up more than half the increase. Plus, airfares, clothing, and new car prices were higher in February. But consumers didn't care. They spent anyway, according to the new CNBC NRF Retail Monitor. Removing the effect of Leap Day, which is an extra shopping day, spending was up 0.4%.
We get credit card data, actual spending data from Affinity Solutions. It showed a 1.1% gain, ex autos and gas, compared with a 0.2% decline in January. The year-over-year, strong 6.3%. Core retail, which also was restaurants, up 1% compared to a 0.04% decline in January.
CNBC senior economics reporter Steve Leisman. IBM says it's slashing jobs in marketing and communications. No numbers and no timeline. Southwest Airlines cutting capacity and rethinking its forecast for this year, blaming Boeing. Lots of airline CEOs have been frustrated by repeated setbacks at Boeing that have delayed deliveries of new planes.
The new retail fad, a store within a store.
Yeah, I mean, this is the trend. Macy's has Toys R Us stores inside some of its locations, and now Kohl's, which already has some Sephora's inside, they're going to have some Babies R Us stores inside.
Kohl's is teaming up with the owner of Babies R Us to bring baby gear, furniture, and more to approximately 200 of its U.S. stores, at least to start. The retailer struck a licensing deal with WHP Global, a brand management firm.
CNBC's Courtney Reagan. On today's watch list, the House is set to vote on legislation that would effectively ban TikTok in the U.S. There are concerns that TikTok's controlled by the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. Earnings are coming from Dollar Tree, Petco, Williams-Sonoma, and home builder Lennar. And tonight's Powerball jackpot, more than $500 million at $559 million.
CNBC's Jessica Ettinger. Trump declares day one agenda if elected. That when America in the Morning continues after these messages. Back now, this is America in the Morning. Donald Trump makes a bold declaration on the first 3 things he'll do on day one if he's elected president once again. Pamela Furr tells us more.
He made a post on his Truth Social. First, he'll close the border, then he'll drill for oil, and then he says he'll pardon anyone convicted for their actions on January 6th. Now, it's the first time the former president has made releasing January 6th defendants as a day one priority, although he's been hinting at the pardons for a while. Trump's even referred to them as hostages, which the White House says is a grotesque description. In fact, the Justice Department has said those convicts put themselves in jail. 770 of them pleaded guilty with courts convicting another 180 people. Meanwhile, about the oil, production is at an all-time high in the U.S., and lawmakers can't seem to figure out what to do nor what to agree on about the southern border and the illegal immigration problem. I'm Pamela Furr.
Following an investigation, the police chief of Uvalde, Texas, is stepping down. Correspondent Haya Panjwani reports.
Uvalde Police Chief Daniel Rodriguez resigned less than a week after a report ordered by the city defended the police department's response to the Roope Elementary School shooting in May 2022. The chief was vacationing in Arizona when a teenage gunman killed 19 children and 2 teachers with an AR-style rifle. The announcement came just hours before the first city council meeting since a private investigator hired by the city unveiled a report that acknowledged missteps by police but concluded that local officers did not deserve punishment. In his resignation email to the Uvalde Police Department, he said it was time to embrace a new chapter in his career. Rodriguez's last day will be April 6th. I'm Haya Panjwani.
America in the Morning for Wednesday, March 13th, 2024 is produced by Jeff McKay. Senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One. This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. I'm John Trout. Coming up this half hour, Biden documents report concerning to both Republicans and Democrats.
Is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government in Israel in jeopardy? I'm John Stolnis in Washington.
Republican donors say there's a lot at stake surrounding a potential TikTok ban. I'm Clayton Neville.
Chaos in Haiti prompts more U.S. involvement.
Consumer prices ticked up last month. I'm Shirley Adler.
A gun rights battle is playing out in a federal court. I'm Jackie Quinn.
Singer Eric Carmen has died. He was 74. I'm Ed Donahue.
Sharon Stone is naming names of Hollywood impropriety in the 1990s. I'm Kevin Carr.
Back after these messages. Potential for severe weather today. Welcome back to America in the Morning. AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rinde has the forecast.
A spring-like storm will be getting underway in the plains today as low pressure exits the Rockies and enters the central plains around Kansas. This will tap into some moisture from the south and help produce strong to severe thunderstorms late in the day in eastern Kansas into southeast Nebraska, as well as northern Missouri and southern Iowa. These storms will continue to expand at night into western Illinois. Thunderstorms could produce gusty winds, hail, flash flooding, and even a tornado, the risk for which will be most concerning at night. Outside of the severe thunderstorms, there will be rain developing from this system from the rest of Nebraska into South Dakota and then moving eastward through southern Minnesota, southern Wisconsin, and northern Illinois tonight. Before the rain gets underway, it'll be a warm day for mid-March across the Plains states, and this warmth will be expansive through the Great Lakes as well as parts of the southeast to New England. Some northern communities will be more than 25 degrees above their historical average. It'll be a largely dry day for most, with a few scattered thunderstorms across the Gulf Coast into Texas and Louisiana, as well as scattered thunderstorm or two in parts of southern Illinois into Indiana. Drier conditions in West Texas will also continue to put that area at a higher fire risk. Behind this storm, colder air will build southward through the plains and Rockies with moderate to heavy snow in the mountains, quickly lowering to the valley floors at night while also expanding into parts of western Nebraska and northwest Kansas. Snow over the mountains will range from 6 to 12 inches, with a few inches possible in places like Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Denver, Colorado. Additional snow will fall Thursday into Thursday night. That's the weather across America. It'll become increasingly windy in Sacramento, California today with plenty of sunshine and a high of 64. It'll be a warm day in Richmond, Indiana with clouds and sun and a high near 70. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rinde.
Remember, follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. I'm John Trout. The special counsel who handled the Biden classified documents probe appeared on Capitol Hill in what became a proxy campaign fight on both sides of the political aisle. Washington correspondent Sagar Meghani reports.
You understood that, did you not?
Congressman, what I understood is the regulations that govern my conduct as special counsel.
And those regulations
required me to write a confidential report for the Attorney General,
which you knew would not be confidential.
My decision, and that is what I did, Congressman. I
Mr.
followed the rules.
You knew it would not be confidential.
Special Counsel Robert Hur had recommended no criminal charges against the president, but knew that alone was not enough.
I needed to explain why.
So he did, saying Joe Biden did keep classified information after leaving the vice presidency, but did not intend to.
But it's frustrating to be like, oh, well, this guy's not getting treated the same way as Trump because the elevator's not going to the top floor, so we can't prove intent. While at the same time, Biden goes out there at the White House and says, well, you know, he just blatantly lies. And what I'm trying to figure out is whether or not Biden's lying because he's still so senile, he hasn't read your report, or whether it's a little craftier and a little more devious and perhaps a little more intentional.
Before the House Judiciary panel, Hur defended his written report that questioned the president's age and mental competence, but did not find enough evidence to bring a criminal case.
Most importantly, what I wrote is what I believe the evidence shows, and what I expect jurors would perceive and believe. I did not sanitize my explanation, nor did I disparage the president unfairly.
Still, Democrats like Adam Schiff accused Hur of political games, saying he gave Republicans campaign fodder by slighting the president.
You were not born yesterday. You understood exactly what you were doing.
Hur pushed back.
Politics played no part whatsoever.
On the other side, Tom McClintock and Republicans argued Biden's own Justice Department is giving him a free pass while prosecuting Donald Trump for what he called essentially the same missteps.
Now we get to this glaring double standard.
Jamie Raskin and Democrats were quick to point out the two cases are not the same. Trump is being prosecuted for refusing to return the classified documents he took, but
the report establishes that President Biden offered complete and unhesitating cooperation with the special counsel's investigation.
The more than 4-hour hearings unlikely to change any minds about the cases during a bitter election, with both Biden and Trump on the cusp of clinching their respective parties' nominations. Sagar Meghani, Washington.
A new U.S. intelligence report finds Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may be in danger of losing his grip on power as criticism grows of his handling of the Gaza war. Correspondent John Stolnis has the story.
The annual report of national security threats facing the U.S. that was given to Congress on Monday indicates Netanyahu's, quote, viability as a leader is, quote, in jeopardy. It goes on to say, quote, distrust of Netanyahu's ability to rule has deepened and broadened across the public, and that a different, more moderate government is a possibility. Speaking via video, Netanyahu addressed the powerful American-Israel Public Affairs Committee, otherwise known as AIPAC, yesterday.
I deeply appreciate the support we've received from President Biden and the administration, and I hope it will continue. But let me be clear. Israel will win this war no matter what.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan yesterday noting Israel has a right to defend itself, but also must defend innocent Palestinian lives too.
Prime Minister Netanyahu is the leader of a sovereign country. He can make determinations about what he's going to do, and let's actually see what happens.
Sullivan also encouraged Israel and Hamas to continue negotiating a temporary ceasefire and hostage exchange.
A ceasefire is on the table today for 6 weeks to be built on into something more enduring if Hamas would simply release women, wounded, and elderly.
Hamas says they have not agreed to a U.S. proposal, despite earlier reports indicating they had. Some Democrats in the U.S. are sounding the alarm about Netanyahu and his handling of the war as the IDF prepares an offensive into Rafah. Senator Michael Bennet on MSNBC.
I can understand the need to dismantle the remaining 6 Hamas battalions that are there, but we need to understand how he's going to do that. And I think that the prevailing view in our country and in many places around the world is that too many civilians have died.
6 Democratic senators, Bernie Sanders, Jeff Merkley, Peter Welch, Chris Van Hollen, Mazie Hirono, and Tina Smith, signing a letter to the president saying Netanyahu has interfered with U.S. humanitarian assistance in Gaza in violation of federal law, which requires the U.S. to stop any and all military assistance to Israel of an offensive nature. John Stolnis, Washington.
There is continued pushback against TikTok as lawmakers in Washington consider a potential ban on the Chinese-owned social media app. Correspondent Clayton Neville has the latest.
Republicans in Washington say that TikTok, which is owned by the Chinese company ByteDance, is a national security threat, concerned over potential information sharing with China. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says the White House welcomes the proposed legislation.
Where do we want that ownership? Where do we want that data of Americans to be? Here or in China? Like, that is basically what the National Security Advisor laid out. And so that is the underlying, the importance of that bill. It's a bipartisan bill.
The proposed bill would ban TikTok unless it distances itself from ByteDance within 6 months. This as a Republican mega donor threatens to cut off campaign money to congressional Republicans unless they support the ban. Tech expert Keith Raboy says he'll never fund any Republican candidates or leaderships for PACs that are run by Republicans who vote against the TikTok ban. Congress expected to vote on the measure today. I'm Clayton Neville.
Top Haitian official resigns, inflation woes, and gun debate in Delaware. A few of the stories we're covering next when America in the Morning continues after these messages. I'm John Trout. America in the Morning continues. The situation in Haiti is spiraling out of control, and now the Haitian Prime Minister is resigning. Correspondent Charles de Ledesma reports the United States is becoming more involved.
The fear of the situation in Haiti, worsening to become a civil war, is now a real one. We're all agreed that this cannot be allowed to happen, not in our hemisphere.
Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry will resign once a transitional presidential council is created, bowing to international pressure that seeks to save the country overwhelmed by violent gangs. Speaking on Monday in Jamaica, Secretary of State Antony Blinken pledged U.S. help.
First, take concrete steps to meet the immediate needs of the Haitian people. Second, enable the swift deployment of the multinational security support mission. And third, through that deployment, through a reinforced Haitian National Police, create the security conditions that are necessary to hold free and fair elections.
Blinken announced an additional $100 million to finance the deployment of a multinational force mission to Haiti. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Consumer prices ticked up by 0.4% last month, and while that wasn't the best news for your wallet, the prospects of a better 2024 seem promising. Correspondent Shelley Adler reports.
Despite February's elevated figures, most economists, including Gus Fauché with PNC Financial Services Group, expect inflation to continue slowly declining this year.
This was kind of a disappointing report, but we have had good inflation numbers recently, and I would expect that we will see inflation slow further over the course of 2024.
As for the Federal Reserve, which meets next week,
they're concerned that inflation is still running a little too hot. I also think it makes it less likely that the Fed will be cutting rates when they meet in May.
Overall inflation has plummeted from a peak of 9.1% in June of 2022, although it's now easing more slowly than it did last spring and summer. I'm Shelley Adler.
They were investigating the circumstances surrounding 43 students in Mexico that disappeared without a trace a decade ago, and now those two detectives have also gone missing. Correspondent Norman Hall reports.
Mexico's president says two detectives looking for a group of students who went missing almost 10 years ago have themselves disappeared in Mexico's Pacific Coast state of Guerrero. President Andres Manuel López Obrador said that a search effort has been launched to find the two federal agents, a man and a woman. Speaking at his daily news briefing, López Obrador said he hopes the disappearance of the detectives is not related to those who don't want to solve the 2014 case of 43 missing students from a rural teachers' college. Gangs are suspected of killing the students and burning their remains. I'm Norman Hall.
An appeal in federal court is taking aim at lifting gun restrictions in Delaware. Correspondent Jackie Quinn reports.
Delaware is one of 9 states that banned certain semi-automatic firearms due to a law in 2022 that also limits gun magazines to 17 rounds. The Delaware State Sportsmen's Association and other groups took that to court. Last year, U.S. District Judge Richard Andrews ruled, even though they should be protected by the Second Amendment, state officials had sufficiently established the weapons and magazines bring unprecedented societal concerns for public safety. Gun rights groups are asking a federal appellate court in Philadelphia to overrule the judge and suspend the weapons limits. I'm Jackie Quinn.
Wireless frequencies have been regulated by the government for decades, but the need for more bandwidth has prompted Congress to bring back auctions for the mobile companies and hardware devices to acquire more. Here's Chuck Palm with that in today's Tech Report.
2 U.S. senators are introducing legislation that would require some U.S. government-owned spectrum to be auctioned off to boost commercial wireless 5G networks. Congress let lapse the auction of wireless spectrum in March of 2023 for the first time in 3 decades amid debate about what spectrum could be used and which could be repurposed or shared. The FCC has controlled frequency spectrum since the early days of radio, TV, and wireless. Mobile U.S. wireless data traffic rose 38% in 2022, the largest ever increase in mobile data traffic. The demand for spectrum is soaring, driven in part by advancements in drones, self-driving vehicles, and precision agriculture. Leave a comment at allthetoptech.tech. I'm Chuck Palm.
With Wednesday sports on America in the Morning, here's Robert Workman.
NBA Tuesday, the Celtics storm past the Jazz 123-107. Jason Tatum, 38 points. Coach Joe Mazzulla says everybody is pulling on the rope.
I didn't say this enough in the locker room, but the fact the last couple games, everybody's stepping up. Like, it's just kind of what we're trying to build, where we have an environment or locker room, a culture of, like, it doesn't matter who's in, guys are ready to play at all times.
Timberwolves erased a 22-point deficit and sank the Clippers. Anthony Edwards with 37. Kings crushed the Bucks, their first win over Milwaukee in 8 years. Wins for the Knicks, Pacers, Rockets, and Grizzlies. College basketball, number 21 St. Mary's beat number 17 Gonzaga to win the West Coast Conference Final. Both teams expect to hear their names called on Selection Sunday. Also last night, Oakland defeated Milwaukee to win the Horizon League tournament. Trey Townsend 38 for the Golden Grizzlies, who also won the regular season title. An upset in the Northeast as Wagner knocked off Merrimack. The Seahawks defeated the top 3 seeds in the conference to capture the flag. Colonial top seed Charleston needed overtime to put down Stony Brook, and in the Summit League, South Dakota State made it a conference sweep by fighting off Denver. 11 spots in the 68-team field have been determined, with 3 more conference finals tonight and 10 conference tournaments opening play today. NHL, the league-leading Panthers scored 3 times in a 3.5-minute span of period 3 to shade the Stars 4-3. Florida has won 18 of its last 21 games. Avalanche smothered the Flames for their 4th straight win. Blackhawks blasted the Ducks. Rookie Connor Bedard with a goal and 4 assists.
We haven't had too many, back-to-backs like that, so for us to build on that, it was good, and obviously, to get on the score sheet a little bit, it's nice for sure.
Sabres slash the Red Wings. Detroit has dropped 6 in a row. Wins for the Rangers, Canadiens, Golden Knights, Senators, Flyers, and Wild. That's Wednesday Sports.
Thank you, sir. When we return on America in the Morning, Hollywood's Sharon Stone is naming names after these messages. America in the Morning continues. Eric Carmen, a popular singer-songwriter from the 70s and 80s who also wrote hit songs from movies like Footloose and Dirty Dancing, has passed away. Correspondent Ed Donahue reports.
Start fronting the power pop 70s band The Raspberries. A year after the Raspberries broke up, Carmen went solo. His biggest hit was about the transition. In a a 2000 AP interview, Carmen said he loved hearing different versions of that song.
I've been in clubs where, without them knowing that I was there, a band would play All By Myself, and they do it with an organ and, all by myself, don't wanna be, and that's great.
There were many Eric Carmen hits, including one on the Dirty Dancing soundtrack. Eric Carmen's wife did not release a cause of death, but said he died in his sleep over the weekend. I'm Ed Donahue.
Actress Sharon Stone opens up about a disturbing incident with a producer in the 1990s. Kevin Carr has that story.
Sharon Stone is continuing to speak out against the sexual impropriety that she experienced in her days as a Hollywood star. On this week's episode of the Louis Theroux podcast, the actress discussed how producer Robert Evans told her to improve her chemistry with William Baldwin in the 1993 thriller Sliver.
I should sleep with Billy Baldwin, because if I slept with Billy Baldwin's performance would get better. And we needed Billy to get better in the movie because that was the problem.
The actress had first told her story in her 2021 memoir, The Beauty of Living Twice, but she never named the studio boss who said Baldwin's performance was not up to snuff.
If I could sleep with Billy, then we would have chemistry on screen. And if I would just have sex with him, then that would save the movie. And the real problem in the movie was me, because I was so uptight.
Stone, now 66, shot to stardom the year before in the erotic thriller Basic Instinct. However, she never had to resort to something like this with that film's co-star.
They expect me to go from Michael Douglas to Billy Baldwin, and Michael could come to work and just know how to hit those marks and do that line and rehearse and show up.
Evans was a Paramount executive who oversaw multiple high-profile productions in the 60s and 70s, including Rosemary's Baby, Love Story, and The Godfather. He passed away in 2019. I'm Kevin Carr.
America in the Morning for Wednesday, March 13th, 2024 is produced by Jeff McKay. Senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One.